Okay, class. Today we have a special guest. Dean Kelly Zlesnik is going to have a few words about the upcoming election. So she offered to come into the class and give a few words about it. And here we go.
All right, thank you, Mike. I really appreciate everyone's time. And thanks for letting me have a few minutes to talk to the class. So as Mike mentioned, my name is Kelly and I work here at the college. I'm so happy to be able to speak to you today. Our next election, our general election, is on Tuesday, November 8th. You may be seeing yard signs out everywhere, and those generally go up within 30 days of an election. And this year, LCC has an issue on the ballot. It's issue 10. And I want to mention to you, first of all, before I talk about issue 10, that voting in local elections is one of the best ways to have an impact on government. And so everyone has the right to vote. Everyone's voices should be heard. And you may not remember it, but in 2013, LCC had an issue on the ballot and they had a levy up for renewal. And in 2013, it was the lowest voter turnout in the history of Lorain County. And LCC won initially by 75 votes, and then there was a recount, and LCC ended up winning by 245 votes, which is a nail biter for all of us that work at Lorain County Community College. And so I share that with you because your vote really does count and it does matter. So about issue 10, issue 10 is the university partnership levy. We have this levy every 10 years, and this year the levy is a renewal, which means there's no new taxes. The levy supports not only the university partnership, but it also supports continuing educational programs here at the college and services. It supports technology in our labs. And so this levy, we go back every 10 years to the citizens of Lorain County. We don't ask for a permanent levy because we believe in proving ourselves to the community and making sure that we're doing what the community wants us to do. So we are on the ballot on November 8th and we are issue 10. And so I ask that you consider voting if you're registered to vote, and I ask that you make a plan to vote. It's really easy to say, yeah, I'll go vote on November 8th. But, then November 8th, comes around and then it's like, oh, I've got all these things I have to do. So I wanted to share with you that if you're on campus, or you can come to campus and get a ride to the Board of Elections to vote. Every day now or Mondays through Thursdays up through November 8th, we are going to have Roll to the Polls, where students and community can come by, get a slice of pizza. We meet at 11:30 near the Starbucks in College Center, have some pizza, ride the bus over to the Board of Elections. You can vote, and then the bus will bring you back by 12:30, 12:45. And so you can go on to your next class, and that way you don't have to worry about your own transportation. If you're nervous about going and voting, if you've never voted before, it kind of can be intimidating. Why not go with a group of people around you that are friends? So anyway, I just want to ask that you make a plan to vote and that you vote, because there are a number of issues on the ballot this year and your voice matters. Mike, that's all I have.
All right.
So thank you everyone for your time. I really appreciate it. Okay, and Mike, I'm going to leave some of these with you. So if you have students who come into class next week,
all right,
you can share that with them. There's information on it on Roll to the Polls, and on the back side more about the levy in issue 10.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
No problem. All right. Today we're going to talk about website accessibility, and you have an assignment about website accessibility. So we're going to cover it. We're going to give you an overview of it. Part of your assignment is to do some research online and to find more complete information about website accessibility, because you're going to be making a page about it. Forget what lab that is. Let me look real quick. Yeah, you do a page about mobile design and about web accessibility. And these are both due on November 2nd. This week, of course, your design is due. Your design is due this Wednesday. And I'll do my best to get feedback to you as quick as possible. It's really important. The better that you can design the website, the easier your task in completing it will be. All right. So at any rate, I pulled up a page before. See if I can find it now. Ultimate Guide to Web Accessibility. This is a good resource. So if you Google website accessibility, this is one of the very first ones that shows up on the list. And they offer a free checklist. It might be worth your time to download the free checklist. You have to give an email. I suggest, by the way, having sort of a throwaway email account that you can use to sign up for these things if you're not interested in getting your real email account spammed with stuff. So it costs nothing to create a Gmail account. So for many of these things that you might want to sign up for and get the information, but not necessarily be bothered with bunches of emails, you can sign up sort of for a burner email account. All right, what is a web accessibility? It's the practice of making websites usable for all visitors, including those with disabilities and impairments and limitations. All right. One thing I would like to point out to you, and we'll cover this in a couple minutes here, is that website accessibility sort of contains more than just developing websites that blind people can use. The first reaction that many people have when they hear about website accessibility is thinking, well, it's developing and making sure your websites are accessible to people that are visually impaired, because the web is such a visual medium. All right. But that really only scratches the surface. That's really only one of the things, one of the different disabilities or impairments that affect people who have impairments. Here's a further list of it. And even this isn't complete. So people that are blind and people that have low vision. All right. You'll notice that every one of these impairments that's discussed, there's sort of an extreme case that has a tremendous effect, but there's also less severe cases that also has an impact. For example, I'm not blind, but I do not have great vision. All right. So I have visited sites that either because of their color combination or because of their size of fonts or whatever, make it very difficult to read. All right. And therefore, it would be, I would consider that an accessibility issue because it affects my ability to interact with the site. One thing they do not have mentioned there is color blindness. All right. Color blindness is an example of a disability that's not total blindness, but the inability to distinguish some colors from each other can impact the way that you have a site, a user accesses the site. For example, if you visit a site and important messages, important text on the site is in red, well, people that are colorblind are not going to be able to distinguish the red from the other colors on the page, from the, or people with certain kinds of color blindness, I should say, are not able to distinguish the red of the page with the, maybe the black of the text or the gray of the text. And therefore, they're going to miss the implication that that information is important. Now, in the case of color blindness, what you do is you present that information a couple ways. So maybe you put a border around the text and have it red. Or maybe you make it a bigger font and red, or in italics and red, or bold and red. So one of the key principles of dealing with web accessibility is when people have a disability, you present the information in more than one way. So if you have a diagram, all right, or an image, or a graph, or something like that, that someone that's blind cannot see, you might present that information in another way, such as a table of data, or a textual description of what the content of the page is. So that's one of the key ingredients in website accessibility, is taking and presenting information two different ways. And that helps for so many different kinds of disabilities. All right. Getting back to colorblind for a second, there's actually a page that helps show you what certain websites, or what your website would look like for someone that's colorblind. This works with images. So this image, and assuming that you do not have a form of color blindness, you see that this is red, this is kind of magenta, this is kind of orange, this is green. But if you have red-green, if you have red weak color blindness, notice that that picture is not as deep of a red. That green looks more like yellow. Likewise, if you have green weakness, or if you have blue weakness, this looks like red. These other color blindness, shows you, other color blindness filter shows you what it would look like if you had different varieties of color blindness. Because color blindness does not mean that you simply see things in black and white. It means that certain colors are not seen correctly, or as other people will see them. So for example, if I had red-green color blindness, if I wasn't able to distinguish red or able to distinguish green, and I said, click the green crayon, you don't see a green crayon, right? So you better have that information shown a different way. Maybe you have a text label on it that says, click the button that says, go on to next step, or something along those lines. All right. So presenting the information two different ways. Now, one thing that's true about website accessibility is that there's things called assistive technologies that help people out that are visually impaired or have other impairments. All right. And these assistive technologies only work if you code your web page in a certain way to take advantage of them. One of the examples that we've talked about so far in this class is the image tag. With the image tag, you should always specify alternate text. So alternate text will explain to the visually impaired user, someone using a screen reader, what the image represents. So it will contain what the image represents. Now, that's certainly not as good as being able to visualize the image, but you might be able to get information from it that you otherwise would not be able to if you put the alt text in there. Why is accessibility important? Well, it's important, first of all, I would say in a moral sense, right? You don't want to exclude people from your website. You know, if you have a store that sells things, people that suffer from different disabilities are great customers to have because many of them are reluctant to leave their house. So many of them find online shopping very attractive. Well, if you have an online store and it's not accessible to people with different disabilities, then you've lost some potential customers. In many cases, it's the law. For example, a government website or other sorts of public websites have the potential of being sued. Even private organizations have the potential for being sued if they violate. Just like a store, could be seen as violating the American Disabilities Act if they don't have a wheelchair ramp. All right. Your website can be can be the topic of a potential lawsuit if you don't implement some of these accessibility things. In these years, 2017 to 2018, there's an increase of 181% of the number of federally filed court lawsuits. Court ruled that websites may constitute public accommodations under the Americans with Disability Acts. Domino's Pizza court ruled in favor of the blind person who was unable to order food through the Domino's website despite using screen reader software. So, you sort of have two reasons there. It's a good thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And in addition, you may be legally bound to do it, and you put your company at risk of lawsuit if you don't follow accessibility guidelines. Let's take a minute to go over some of the assistive technologies that exist within Windows. On Windows, if you go and open the control panel, there is the Ease of Access Center.
Always scan this section.
And let me turn down the volume a little bit, if I can. I hope you can hear this. As soon as I accessed this page, it actually narrated the page to me.
Start magnifier.
And as it's going around, it's showing me the options that I can do. For example, the Start Magnifier. It magnifies the screen. So people with intense, very poor vision can magnify the screen and see exactly what's going on here. Narrator actually reads the screen to the user. So I'm going to turn it on, and then I'm going to turn it off again once we get the idea.
Access Center window. Set up high contrast. Button. Icon Start Magnifier. Button. Magnifier enlarges part of the screen. Alt plus G.
It's reading the screen and it's telling you what each of these buttons do.
Text on the screen. Alt plus N. Start on-screen keyboard. Button. On-screen keyboard makes it possible to type using the mouse or another pointing device by clicking key. Set narrator dialog. Okay, exiting narrator.
Okay, now you might think when you hear that that is very difficult. And you might imagine it's very difficult for people to get around the web using only a screen narrator that reads the pages to you. Well, it's difficult, but people that are blind have no other option for accessing the web. Can you imagine not using the web, either in your schoolwork or personal life or professional life? All right, it's unthinkable. I mean, it's a reality today that you need to interact with the web to fully participate in society. All right. If you're blind and you're cut off from the web, that is a major hardship for you. So people will adapt and they will learn to use these tools if that's the only way to access them. I had a fellowship with NASA many years ago, and someone that was in the same office as me was a blind high school kid that navigated the computer using that narrator that read the screen to them. And they were able to do pretty much everything that a person with good vision was able to do simply by using that narrator, because they learn how to use that tool and they use that tool to perform their job function and do whatever other function they needed to do on the computer. So I've witnessed firsthand someone that is able to interact with the computer, and that really emphasized for me the importance of developing websites that are accessible. On-screen keyboard actually displays on the screen keyboard. Turn. Magnifier off. There we go. So the on-screen keyboard, who is that meant for? That is meant for people that have motor control issues. By motor control, I mean the availability to use their muscles. I had a student, again, several years ago who was confined to a wheelchair, and they really didn't have really good control of their hand function. So they were not able to type on a keyboard like most students are able to do. However, they were able to type by moving the cursor around. They were able to use the mouse to move the cursor around and to type in using this keyboard. Again, we may look at these things and think it's difficult to do that. However, if it's your only option, you will learn to make it work for you. One thing with vision as well is you can set up high contrast. Turn on or off high contrast when Alt left shift print screen. And you can turn on the narrator, turn on audio descriptions, turn on magnifier, turn on or off high contrast, other things that you can do. Use a computer without a display. The computer devotes a lot of its resources to displaying information on the screen. Well, if you're blind, you have no need for a screen, and you have no need for your computer to devote all that energy to displaying the screen. So you can actually use your computer without a display, and that'll optimize the performance of it to not have to worry about displaying things on the screen. The high school student that I talked about that was blind at the NASA Summer Fellowship would when I would come in the morning, she would be there working on her computer with the screen totally off, and should be typing, and she would be navigating around the computer, but without any display, because she didn't need the display because she couldn't see it. She was able to take advantage of the screen navigator and the keyboard to access what she needed to. And if it's optimized for no display, then the computer can take its resources, its memory, its processor speed, and devote that fully to other things other than displaying. Use the computer without a mouse or a keyboard. You can set up alternate input devices, touchpads, and so on. Make the mouse easier to use. You can change the mouse pointer. You can control the mouse with the keyboard, and so on. So there's a bunch of tools built into most computer systems, and then there are specialized versions of these tools that you can add onto your computer. For example, text-to-speech, so that you don't have to type commands in. You can instead narrate to the computer, and it will take what you say. If, for example, you wanted to write a Word document. All right. So Windows and Mac operating system may have rudimentary tools, but you can purchase better, more high-quality tools to do some of these tasks. So how to make your website accessible? One thing they state is offer text alternatives, and that is with the image attribute, which you can leave blank if it's pure decoration. So for example, if you have just a little frilly swatch of color on your page and it doesn't really add anything, you can make the alt attribute empty. But otherwise, if you had a graph or a piece of information that was displayed via an image, you would put a description of your image in the alt attribute. Offer alternative ways to consume time-based media. So, audio and visual content. Audio content, for example, people that are blind can consume. People that are deaf or are hard of hearing may have difficulties with that. So there's many ways around that. You can create alternate text for those audio sources. You could, for example, have a transcript of what the audio says. All right. Or you could put closed caption on your audio. So as the audio is speaking, a caption of it could display. Now, as far as video goes, same thing. For people that are deaf, a transcript of the video or captions for the video. Blind people are also affected by their ability to consume video. They can hear the audio of a video track, but they may miss things. For example, in a drama, if Henry enters the room, they don't notice that, and things might be confusing. So there actually is a way to add to the narration of videos directions like that, saying that, well, Henry enters the room. So they know that that action has happened and they can understand the video more thoroughly. All these things can be summarized by saying that offer more than one way to get to the content of your page. That'll be beneficial for people with disabilities, as we've shown. People that are blind can't consume an image, but their screen reader can read any text that explains that image to them. People that are deaf cannot hear an audio recording or video recording, but captions or transcripts allow them to read the content. Now, some of these other things come into play as well. For example, people with certain cognitive disabilities or learning disabilities can benefit for this as well. Take, for example, dyslexia. All right. If someone is dyslexic, they can mistake letters for each other, and letters may appear jumbled or something like that. Images can help them understand the text by showing them an image and along the text that will help increase their understanding when they read the text. Likewise, people with other cognitive disabilities, the text along with an image can help explain something more thoroughly than just the image or just the text. There actually is a simulator, I believe, I've seen before. Let me see if I can find it now. It simulates what it's like to be dyslexic. Oh, it did it. Notice what this reads. And the letters are shifting. This says, contrary to popular belief, not every person with dyslexia will reverse letters while reading and writing. And you can make it stop if you want. So it's a challenge with people that are dyslexic to read any sort of text. So for them, it's not the text along with the audio, but it's the audio along with the text that can be beneficial, because then they don't have to read a bunch of text. They can have the text read to them through audio. One thing to keep in mind is many of these things that we do for disabilities also come into play for people that are not disabled. So if I'm in a computer in a lab, for example, if I'm a student and I'm taking a course in one of our labs don't have any speakers on them, because obviously that would be very difficult if you had 30 people all listening to different things at the same time. It would be chaos. But if there was an audio file that I wanted to see, if there was a text equivalent of it, then I could read the text. Pretty quick reader. So rather than sitting through a video that might take 5 minutes to read, I might want to scan quickly through a transcript of the video, and that might only take me a minute to read. And then maybe after I've read it, I can decide if I want to watch the video or not. So the features that we put on our site for people with disabilities can also benefit people that do not have disabilities. It simply adds value to our site. So one of the rules to developing websites that are accessible is have alternatives. Alt text, transcripts. Have the ability to switch fonts. People with dyslexia, sometimes certain fonts are easy for them to read than others. You have the ability to customize the font on the page. That can be very useful. Ensure functionality via the keyboard. All right. People that are have carpal tunnel syndrome, or have arthritis, or have other motor control issues, it may be very difficult for them to navigate a mouse around the page. Might be painful, or they might have a hard time getting to a place on the page. If you can access the links and the other content of the page via the keyboard, that's a big boost for people with that, with those sort of disabilities. So for example, Control Click opens it in a new thing, and that would involve the keyboard though. I suggest going to google.com. Notice if I press tab, the little blue border that goes around things shows me what I'm accessing. I want to get to about, I could use the tab to tab over, and then press the text bar to select it. You can also give keyboard shortcuts for links. This is all showing examples in Word. Let's see. I refine the search. You do that with the access key. Here we go. Can't find a good example over that. Trust me, you can do it using the access key attribute on a link to allow the user to be able to press Alt and then go to the link. Again, another case of an alternative. They can access it via the mouse click. They can access it via the keyboard. The ability to do that is a tremendous benefit to users. Structure content in an adaptable way, using proper headings. Make sure your content is easy to see and hear. Avoid blinking and flashing content. Provide navigation to help users know where they are and where they can go. Making text readable. Structuring your pages logically. Write HTML that can be parsed. In other words, write HTML with the proper ending tags and starting tags and structured in the correct way. All these things are basic web design principles. So if you follow the way you've been taught in this class, that puts you in a position to develop good accessible websites. All right? It's going to be very rare that someone's going to say this website is too simple to interact with. Usually when websites go bad, it's because of the opposite. The website is too complicated, has too much stuff on it. The navigation is too confusing, and so on. So along with providing alternatives for doing things, keeping your web design simple and clean is a good way to make your website more accessible. Just follow the basic rules of web design. It will benefit people with disabilities. It will benefit people that don't have disabilities. What person, regardless of any disability, wants to access a website where the navigation is confusing? None of them. Everyone wants a website where the navigation is clear. Well, that'll benefit people without disabilities, but will also benefit people with disabilities. Who wants to visit crowded, cluttered page? One of the classic examples of this is Ling's cars. There's so much going on here. Now, this is bad from an accessibility standpoint in that someone with ADHD is going to be very distracted by this page. Some of those animations have the potential to trigger seizures even in some extreme cases. All this clutter makes it very difficult to focus on things for people with certain cognitive and learning disabilities. But you know what? It makes it complicated for people that don't have those disabilities too. So following good design, keeping things simple, clear, is good all the way around. The other thing to keep in mind is provide multiple ways to access the content of your page. All right, I do want to spend a minute talking about what you need to do for your design, which is due this Wednesday. Here's what you're going to give me. You're going to give me a Word document that has 4 sections in it. A strategy section, a scope section, a structure section, and a wireframe. And you can use the ability to draw in Word with shapes to do the last 2. The strategy section is simply a list of goals, a set of personas, and goals for everyone. Goals for you creating the site and goals for each one of your personas. Remember, a persona represents hypothetical groups of people that could be visiting your site. Scope is a list of requirements. Requirements relate to specific pieces of content that will help achieve goals. So for example, if you developed a website for a restaurant, one of your users may be a user with a certain dietary restriction. Maybe they're a vegetarian, maybe they have allergies or whatever. One of their goals is going to be able to identify whether or not your restaurant meets their dietary restrictions. Well, what would be things that would achieve that? Well, maybe a menu with a key that indicates whether it is vegan, vegetarian, contains certain allergens, and so on, might be useful. So the requirement might be Every dish on the menu is displayed with a key indicating vegetarian, vegan, allergens, and so on. A list of all these requirements is the scope section. The structure is sort of like an organization diagram where you have the home page and you have how pages go underneath that. Why did you organize your site that way? A wireframe is the skeleton of a certain pages on your website. And then finally, a prototype is actual HTML. That's the last thing that you're going to do. In addition to the Word document, you're going to give me some rough draft web pages for your topic. So those things, the Word document that contains those 4 sections and sample, example, prototype HTML pages are required for the design. If you have any questions at all, or if you have any difficulty coming up with some of the material or sections, first of all, I would suggest that you review the lecture where we covered that in class. Secondly, shoot me an email and ask me questions about that, or really any other difficulties that you have. It's important that you get this design correct. If you get this design correct, then developing your site will be very straightforward. Any questions? All right, that's all I had for today. We will see you next week.